Teresa, the little daughter of Fabiola and Roy, is the main character of the story. Teresa has been experiencing bad dreams lately with a large dog. This is a result of the German Shepherd that lives next door becoming unfriendly to her. Roy had a conversation with their neighbor Chava following a basketball game. Since things between their spouses may be better, they both wish to strengthen the bonds between their families. At the conclusion of the day, they decide to share a meal that evening. Afterwards, he invites their neighbor to supper, and he and his partner Anahi visit their home. Fabiola and Roy agreed to go, but they cannot leave their daughter alone. In order for Teresa to accompany them, they ask the neighbors to allow them to keep their dog. Though she is hesitant to accept, Anahi does not enjoy the thought of shutting up her dog. They had a brief conversation about their work at supper that night while the pet is caged. We find out that Anahi and Chava got together while attempting to liberate animals from a breeding facility. It becomes clear that the two are actively engaged in defending the rights of animals. While they are still talking, their dog Jagger begins to bark loudly out of the blue. Fabiola is unhappy because she thought the dog had been put in a cage. Then, Anahi makes a gentle attempt to introduce Teresa to Jagger. However, the dog starts barking once again, scaring the young child. Furious with the fight, Fabiola snatches her daughter and leaves the scene. Fabiola vents her annoyance on her husband once she gets home. She believes that they are not similar to their dumb neighbors. The fact that they manage the dog like a kid bothers her as well. Teresa can't find her beloved doll the day before she leaves for school. She had looked everywhere in the home, and then all of a sudden she sees Jagger destroying everything. Teresa picks up a stone and tries valiantly to bring her doll back, but the dog attacks back and ended up biting her arm before she can hit it. Fabiola arrives with a canine opposition and sprays Jagger all over to frighten him away before things get worse. The scenario then moves to the hospital. The physician notifies Roy and Fabiola that Teresa may lose her arm's movement due to her severe injury. For the little girl's mobility to be strengthened, treatment is required. Upon learning of what has transpired, Chava and Anahi visit Teresa in the hospital and give her a plush puppy. They won't, however, accept responsibility for what their pet did. Rather, they fail to comprehend Teresa's initial reason for becoming close to their dog. Fabiola fights with the pair and declines to take the stuffed animal since she is obviously upset with them. Roy phones the police that evening to report the occurrence, but they inform him that they are unable to intervene since it is outside of their purview. Fabiola refuses to let up and is adamant about taking action regarding the dog. She advises phoning Marcos, his pal who practices law and has some connections to the local government. Roy finds the concept appealing, so he gives Marcos a call right away to beg for his assistance. A couple of weeks later, Jagger is taken into custody by the authorities. Anahi cries out and objects, telling them to leave him alone. She even implies that because the girl was at fault, they need to take her instead. However, they ignore her and take the dog away by force. Roy has no control over the issue at all at this moment. His friend makes the terrible decision to transport Jagger to an unlicensed shelter and put him to death. Roy and Fabiola talk about everything that occurred when they get home. They inquire whether their acts were appropriate and begin placing blame on one another. Roy feels that they never should have phoned Marcos in the first place and regrets becoming involved with him. That evening, the couple's home unexpectedly loses electricity. Meanwhile, Teresa awakens from her slumber and says she spent the entire night watching the dog through the window. However, her mother tells her to go to bed because it's probably only a nightmare. Roy and Fabiola learn the next day that someone altered with the electrical close to their home, which was the reason of the power outage. They find out from a neighbor that Anahi was observed the other night prowling about their property. The pair then chooses to speak with Chava directly in order to avoid preventing it from occurring once more. Remarkably, Chava acknowledges his wife's error and extends his regret for the inconvenience. He also lets them know that they've made the decision to move out of their home and make a new beginning somewhere else. They drop off a plush puppy at their neighbor's house before leaving. Regretfully, they also cut through all of Fabiola's tires. Roy and Fabiola have a great deal of peace that evening since their unsettling neighbors have left. Teresa still claims the dog will be watching her out the window when she awakens once again. The parents are concerned about this and ultimately choose to look into it. They have the impression that someone is observing them while they look outdoors. After that, Roy leaves to examine his property, leaving his wife and daughter secure indoors. However, Fabiola quickly discovers that the burglar's alarm isn't operating. Roy gets a call from Marcos in the interim, but he's too busy to respond. Subsequently, Fabiola answers to the call on their mobile phone. Marcos tells her that he looked into the suspicious neighbors and discovered something rather unsettling. It appears that Anija and Chava were lying under false pretenses the entire time, and this is not the first time they have done this. Roy notices a half-used cigarette in the yard and knows that their neighbors are still hiding close by. He goes out to find them, determined to put an end to the purported pranks. Teresa is back in the house, staying near her mother while clutching the plush puppy. Fabiola thinks someone else could be inside as she sees one of the windows open at this same time. For protection, the two lock themselves in Teresa's chamber. While Roy is still looking for the neighbors, a guy wearing a dog mask startles him. After that, the guy strikes him and uses a sharp weapon to sever his knee. As Fabiola is trying to divert her daughter's attention in the interim, they hear a tap on the door. They both choose not to open it, but a third party breaches the lock. Anahi is really the one sporting another dog disguise. Fabiola locks the door from the inside with all her strength, trying to keep the invader out. She succeeds in keeping Anahi out by somehow hurting her palm. A few minutes later, the door is again knocked on. Fortunately, Roy's voice is audible this time. He has made it to the room despite the fact that he is heavily bleeding from one knee. Now that they are all together, each of them are regrettably unable to ask for assistance. They are compelled to search for a phone outside of the room as they have no other choice. They suddenly run across Anahi and Chava in the living room. They are both dressed as dogs. Roy lingers to delay them while his spouse and daughter dash to get assistance. Teresa and Fabiola arrive to Jorge, their neighbor's home, but nobody answers the door when they ring the bell. After that, Fabiola tells her daughter to go via the pet's entrance to enter the house. The latter succeeds, but not long after, Chava launches a surprise attack on Fabiola. Teresa discovers Jorge restrained and immobile inside the home. After bringing Fabiola returning to her home, Chava departs once more in an attempt to apprehend Teresa. Still, he discovers that Jorge is free and guarding the little girl when he gets to Jorge's residence. Chava is easily defeated by local boxer Jorge, who leaves him hurt on the ground. After that, he tries to flee with Teresa, not realizing that Anahi is not far behind. She comes out of nowhere behind a bush and slices Jorge's throat, instantly murdering him while they are fleeing for their life. A harmed Chava comes to Roy and Fabiola's house in their absence. He tells the couple in captivity what his objective is. He will cause Teresa, their little daughter, to suffer in the same way that Jagger did. Chava then demonstrates to them the dog repellent and electrical apparatus that can be used to punish Teresa. Chava, however, intends to enjoy herself with the pair until Anahi brings the young child over. Weakened by excessive blood loss, Roy requests a drink and a smoke. Chava gives up to his requests because they had a strong male relationship in the past. With assurance, he releases Roy and makes an attempt to light his cigarette. Roy is unaware that he has a plan. Chava, therefore, has significant wounds to his face. But in a fit of rage, he turns Roy's life was terminated by zapping him with an electric machine. Fabiola is devastated to learn of her husband's passing, but all she can do is grieve. Anahi gets rid of Jorge in the interim, then she and Teresa head back home. She discovers that Roy is dead and that her husband's face has been severely burned. She is devastated by this, not because her spouse had serious burns, but more because he killed Roy. Before killing Fabiola and Roy, she wanted them to see how painful Teresa's death was. Still, Anahi brings her partner to the other room so that she may tend to his injuries. The young child deftly frees her mother while they are gone. Anahi enters the room again when they are ready to leave. However, Fabiola slaps her in the head with a bottle before she can respond. Consequently, Anahi loses consciousness after collapsing to the floor and hitting her head on some furniture. When Chava eventually makes it back to the living room, he finds his wife dead on the floor. He is so distraught that he snatches a knife and swears to exact revenge on her. After looking through the entire home, he eventually makes it to the second level, where Teresa and Fabiola are hiding. The sound of the toy dog exposes the two. Despite their best efforts to remain hidden, Chava attacks them out of fury, but Fabiola fights back with all of her power. Eventually, she's able to get hold of a hook and graze his neck. At last rendered helpless, Chava moans in agony and slowly falls to the ground. Fabiola and Teresa quickly leave the room and go downstairs, seizing the opportunity. Anahi is resting on the floor in the living room when they arrive. Since their vehicle is their only method of escape, Fabiola immediately removes the keys from her pocket. The mother and daughter team eventually arrives to the car and climbs inside. But just as they turn on the engine, Fabiola, driven by retaliation, makes the decision to ensure that Chava is permanently gone. She drives back to the house after dropping her kid off. After grabbing a golf club, Fabiola goes upstairs in the next scenario. She punches Chava non-stop until he is dead, determined not to give him another opportunity. After getting her retribution, she goes downstairs to see her kid. But when she gets to the bottom floor, she finds that Anahi has vanished. She becomes terrified by this and thinks her daughter is in danger at that moment. Then, when Fabiola rushes outdoors, she realizes it's too late. As it happens, Anahi, who was believed to be dead, was just slightly unconscious. The action then moves to a police headquarters, where Anahi is being searched for and an investigation is underway. The inquiry board has a number of images and press clippings pertaining to the recent horrific events. Nevertheless, the investigators are unable to provide any fruitful results. Days stretch into weeks as time goes on, but the police are still unable to find Anahi and the young child. They disappear and are never seen again. Fabiola is now by herself and defenseless, cries out to the authorities to get her tiny child. Meanwhile, we encounter Anahi at an unnamed location where she has undergone a total transformation. She resides in a luxurious home by herself. We witness her getting home from the grocery store. She then appears to be making food for her dog in the kitchen, but when she walks to the downstairs to deliver the meal, and the somber truth is revealed, it becomes apparent that the meal is for Teresa, who is shackled like a dog to her neck and legs while being held slave in the basement. The story ends here.